Hey everyone, I'm Andy and you're joining me today in another rainy day inside Mac and Cheese in Northern California. You know, last May, Jim Farley, Ford CEO, in an interview with The Verge, said that there was going to be a UX refresh for the Mach-E that would come out later in 2022. He likened it to a new iPhone update of the OS and said everything in the UX is going to change. Well, it's now January 2023, and this new UX that Farley promised last year is finally rolling out. Today, we're going to look at the top 6 features of this new UX and go into what's different, what's changed, and what actually might be better. Stay tuned. All right, so this new UX is going to be rolling out to most Mach-E's over the next month or two. The power-up version number for this update is 4.1.2. You know, you can also get it if you have the FDRS software and equipment yourself to do it at home, or if you have a nice dealer, you can maybe, ask them nicely and they'll do it for you. All right, so assuming you have the update, what's actually changed and different? I think there's actually 6 things that we should go through. The first is how you change your HVAC settings, your heat and cooling. Second is the app space itself, where you see the main portion of the screen and apps that you can run on it, such as mapping and CarPlay and Android Auto. The third is the top bar. The top bar has changed and is much more useful, I think. Fourth is how you launch other apps and get around and navigate in your Mach-E. The fifth thing is settings. Settings have changed considerably, I think, for the better. And finally is the wonderful new camera button, which is at the top of the screen and always accessible and persistent. Okay, so here's the update itself and the updated interface. It's running CarPlay right now, but let's go to the Ford native navigation so you get a sense of how the app space is and the full new UI. First, let's talk about one of the main things that's changed for the better, hopefully, and it's being able to control any of the temperatures, seat heating, and fan speed that's in your car. If you remember, and I'll show you a shot right now of the old interface, you had to go and press the temperature button and then use a slider that popped up on the screen while driving to try and adjust the temperature to precisely what you wanted. Here's how that's changed in the new interface. Instead of using the middle knob just for volume at all times, when you press one of the temperature buttons, as I am doing right here, it changes the mode of this middle button to be one that controls that function. So here I'm changing the temperature in the car from 74, 75, 76, and I'm able to do that without really kind of looking down very much and without having to use precise movement on the screen to change a slider. If you notice, if you don't move it for about a second or two, it's gonna go out of that mode, set that temperature, and go back to the middle knob being used for volume. So let's show you that again, 73. Let's say I want to increase it to 75. I can let go and it will change back in about 2 seconds. Or if I want, I can go 73 and then press it in, and that'll set the temperature right there. So they're using the volume knob in the middle, not just to do volume, but as a knob that can change things like HVAC controls. And they're also using the select function, the push in function of the knob, that in the previous UI wasn't active at all. Here's another example of that. I'm going to try and change my seat heating. So I press the seat heating button, and now I can change it from off 1, 2, 3, and if I press it in, it's going to hold the seat heating. So very good practical change, and as long as you kind of can hit the temperature or HVAC control that you want, you can then really use the knob without looking down too much. Okay, here's the second biggest change that I see in the UI, and it is that they increase the amount of space available for applications. So before, you would have a window that you can do one of two things to. You can have it be smaller and have these widgets below be relatively big, and in that sense they would hold kind of active information, such as the tire pressure widget here would show you the tire pressure without having to click into it. They've done a trade-off here, probably by seeing that most people don't actually keep the screen with the widgets being big, and they permanently made these widgets small here. So these are kind of an easy way to get back to your last recent apps, such as tire pressure here. But you have to go into the widget and press it to go into the app in order to see your tire pressure. You didn't do that before. You can have it be big and have it shown on the screen. Instead of showing you and giving you the possibility of having those larger widgets there, now what you have is one option where the screen is much bigger, the app screen, and instead the widgets are smaller, but the app screen itself is much bigger. It takes up, I would say, about 5% more of the screen real estate. That means that CarPlay or your native navigation or your radio stations, all of these things are now bigger. All right, the third thing we got to talk about is the top status bar, which has changed. Before, it had three icons. It had a car icon in the top left, which always was a gray car, even though you might have had an awesome car like mine, which is Cyber Orange, or a Grabber Blue, or any of the other great cars for the Mach-E. You couldn't personalize that. It was always kind of gray. You had in the middle your profile, and on the far right, you just had the time and some other icons that were kind of cryptic. Now what they've done is they've redone this top status bar. It's got three icons on the top left, as you can see. It's got some icons on the right along with the time. And then in the corner on the right, it has your profile icon. That's the current active profile. So let's go through these icons in turn because they highlight the next biggest features that are in this new UI. The first one here, inextricably, is a house icon, but it's not really a house or home. It's your app launcher, your app tray. If you press this, you'll get apps and entertainment tabs with your main apps in it. You'll notice that Ford still thinks that sketching is not entertainment, but let's put that one aside. Most of your apps are here. You notice they have some different styles for the icons. I don't know what's going on with that and why they made a media icon in red with kind of a 3D look to it. And then you have a very flat icon that's black and white for CarPlay and Android Auto. But putting that aside, you have those apps, and then you also have entertainment. And then you also have a couple of new games. I think new games that they put in this Power Up update are Bridge Battle, Parking Lot, and I think Sudoku might be new, but I'm not sure. But definitely Bridge Battle and Parking Lot are new. The one I like the best is Parking Lot. This one I've played for hours already because it's been raining and I've had nothing else to do. So that's the new app launcher, and it's definitely better than it was before, where the function was combined with changing your profile. So it was very confusing probably to some people. Okay, let's go to the next one, which is really cool, which is settings. They've changed settings considerably. So before, you had to go into the car icon on the left. When you did so, you saw settings and controls in these two tabs. And then you had a very long list on each one. It was very confusing, and it was also kind of inefficient to have to scroll through this list on the left and then scroll through all the controls on the right. So you had to find out whether something was in controls or settings. Then you had to scroll down on the left to the right kind of square that held the setting you want. And then you had to scroll down the list on the right. Really, really confusing and complex to do. So here's what they did instead. You have this little icon here, you bring it down, and boom, you're right in the one that says controls. You can see it here because they have a little icon here, or a little indicator here, which says you're on the control screen. The controls, which were in about 5 different ones on the left, are now combined in one kind of compact screen. They have the font be a little bit smaller so they can have the information density of the screen be a lot higher. And you'll see at the top, you can choose your drive mode, whisper, unbridle, or engage. And they have a really cool kind of new screen. You'll also notice that overall, this UI is far snappier, has very little lag compared with the old UI. They didn't change the hardware, so obviously the old UI and the old screen in the middle had a lot of jank, a lot of kind of latency in the software. So God only knows what they had to optimize, but they really did do a good job of optimizing things in the new UI. So we're in unbridled mode right now. You'll notice there are 3 other icons here. One is for charging, the other one is to open your frunk, and the other one is to open your hatch. As an example, I can press this and boom, my hatch is opening in the back. I'm going to close it right now on the screen. So it gives you really one-touch access to things that were a little bit tough and took a long time to bring up the last time. Let me show you this one more time of how quick it is for this to come up. So let's go back to the native navigation here, and I'm going to go right to settings, and it brings it up right away, and I can open very, very quickly. You'll notice in some other screens like general that they've compressed the information density, so there's a lot more dense here in terms of settings, but they've also combined some other screens that used to be in separate sections of the settings and therefore were really tough to find, like display. They've put them all under the general settings. So you have things that display, which used to be in a separate one, in the same setting. Whoops, let's not change my time. Let's do auto time update there. And you also have things like ambient lighting, if your car is so equipped, all under one thing here. So this is actually kind of cool and a much more efficient use of the menu system and the information architecture, as they call it in UX. All right, so let's go into the next one, which is the camera on the top status bar. Check this out. Anywhere I am, I could be driving, I could be in the parking lot game, I could be doing anything. I have quick access to my camera. And that's really, really great. That alone is really worth this new UX update. So camera, bringing it up is much faster than it used to be. Before, let me remind you what it was like. I'll put it up on the screen here. You had to go into the car setting on the left. And then of course it wasn't by default to the camera. So you had to go down to the second icon whenever it came up, and then you would be in the camera. And you had to do this while you were kind of like trying not to hit something in a parking lot or in a tight space. Hugely much better to have the camera easily accessible and persistent on this top left part of the screen. Finally, one more thing that you see here, because CarPlay is active, they also put a button on the top left up here to easily get back to CarPlay. All right, finally, let's talk about what they redid here with the profiles on the far right. So before, profiles were in the middle button, and the middle part of the screen would come down and combine both profiles and to get to all of your apps and navigate to that. That was kind of confusing. What they did here is they have a separate whole full screen section for the profile, and it lets you do all these different functions that are important to manage profiles and to switch them. All right, finally, is this better? Well, that's a really interesting question. I think on the whole it really is. Here's the things I like and don't like about it. So first, really love the fact that CarPlay and other apps are able to be shown on the screen much larger. Honestly, I almost never used the large size widgets, and I really like the fact that they did a trade-off of simplifying things and using that extra space to give you a larger app space. Secondly, I really like the camera icon being there and having a persistent camera. Third, I really love the optimization they did and the lack of latency in this new UI. It's so much snappier. I think also Ford's use of the physical button for modal things other than volume is a really good move, and it evidences hopefully a trend away from using capacitive direct access display buttons on a screen for everything. There's been such a move in car design to remove all buttons and change them to be capacitive. Even where they couldn't put a display like on a steering wheel, they've changed all buttons to have no feel and to not be even visible sometimes at night. It's really not a good trend to make you have to look at everything and take your eyes off the road if you need to adjust your temperature or go to the next track of the music or being able to control your seat heating. I think it's a great move to make things so that they're more tactile, so you can change things through a glance instead of through a more than 1 to 2 second look at everything. And so I think that this change that Ford has made in allowing use of this dial for things other than volume is really going to help with driver distraction and is probably a good example of how physical controls really have a place in a world where there's more screens in a car. The one thing I actually don't really like about the new UI is the density of the buttons on the far left. It is a little bit tough sometimes, especially if the car is moving and you're doing a glance, especially with the camera, to tap and stab the camera one. Finally, and it's not the biggest thing to me because God knows I can't draw, but there's 3 different styles of icons in this UI update. There's these icons at the top that look like they were done from a Google image search, find me a home icon. So they're kind of like weird and generic and kind of seem very early 2000s. Then you have some icons that are now changed for Ford's apps. It looks like the native apps now have colored icons, and those are different, of course, than the icons at the top. And then you have the older icons from the first UI refresh, like the Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and tire pressure icons, which are all monochrome. And they're all kind of coexisting and in different areas of the screen. So that bothers me a little bit that they didn't have that little attention to detail that would really make this UI feel a little bit more polished. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this rainy day walkthrough of Ford's new UI. When you do get it in your car, leave a comment and let me know what you think. In the meanwhile, hope you have adventures in your car, and I'll see you on the next one.